The moon hung low over the kingdom, casting silver light on the stone walls of the royal palace. In the heart of the citadel, the grand hall was alive with music and chants. Tonight was the night of the mating ceremony, an ancient ritual that bound the chosen mate to the Alpha King. The people of the kingdom had waited for this night with a mix of fear, reverence, and hope. No one dared speak of the consequences if the ceremony failed. Lysandra sat alone in a small tower chamber, her hands pressed against the cold iron bars of her window. Her eyes, bright with defiance, stared out at the moonlit courtyard below. From this height, she could see the soft glow of torches lining the streets and hear the faint echo of drums from the hall. She had not expected to be here. She had been locked away, betrayed by those who envied her unknown heritage, who feared that her destiny might outshine their own. Fear and anger churned in her chest. She had spent years feeling like an outsider, and now she was being punished for a tradition she had never wanted. Yet even as she struggled with her frustration, she felt a strange pull, a whisper in her heart, drawing her toward the figure she had never met. The Alpha King himself. Something in her blood told her that she was meant to stand beside him, yet the cruel hands of fate had trapped her in this lonely prison. Below, the grand hall glowed with life. Courtiers in silken robes moved gracefully, their voices blending into the haunting melody of the ceremony. The scent of flowers and incense filled the air, a perfume of ritual and destiny. Lysandra's ears caught a sudden hush as the king entered, his presence commanding the attention of all. Roan, the Alpha King, was a man of power and mystery. His dark hair fell to his shoulders, and his eyes held storms within them, eyes that seemed to pierce the very souls of those around him. He was feared and admired in equal measure, a ruler who carried the weight of the kingdom with quiet authority. Roan paused mid-hall, sensing the absence of the chosen mate. Something deep inside him stirred, a rare and unsettling worry that made his jaw tighten. He knew the ceremony could not proceed without her, and yet she was nowhere to be found. His sharp gaze swept the crowd, searching for the signs of treachery, for the whisper of betrayal that might explain her disappearance. The air around him seemed to thrum with anticipation, a tension that no one dared break. Back in her chamber, Lysandra pressed her forehead against the cold stone wall. She could almost feel him, though they had never met. It was as if the air itself carried his power, his presence brushing against her spirit. A whisper of magic flickered through her veins, a strange warmth that contrasted with the chill of the stone around her. The blood in her veins seemed to recognize him, calling out for connection. And yet, fear held her back. She did not trust the sudden pull of destiny, not when her life had been one long chain of betrayals and deceit. Hours seemed to stretch like days. The ceremony had begun, the chants growing louder, echoing through the palace like a song older than the kingdom itself. Lysandra could feel the rhythm in her chest, a pulse that matched the beating of her heart. She closed her eyes, imagining what the hall might look like, imagining him, the Alpha King, standing proud, waiting, unaware of her lonely imprisonment. Then came a sound that made her blood run cold, a sudden crash from the door below. The wooden barrier shook violently, splinters falling to the floor. Lysandra stumbled back, fear and disbelief warring within her. The door groaned as if some enormous force pressed against it, bending iron and wood alike. Her heart leapt into her throat as she realized someone was breaking in, and then she saw him. Roan's shadow fell across the doorway, massive and unstoppable. The Alpha King himself had come, tearing through her prison with hands that seemed to bend the world around them. His eyes met hers, dark with intensity, but also with an unspoken understanding. No words were needed. The bond between them was already spoken in some language older than time. "Lysandra," he said, his voice low and steady, yet carrying the force of command. "You do not belong in here." She swallowed hard, unsure if she should trust him. She wanted to flee, to hide from the destiny that now threatened to consume her. Yet something in his gaze held her in place, a magnetic force stronger than fear. The magic in the room seemed to hum, responding to their presence. Shadows twisted around them, as if the walls themselves recognized the bond forming. I cannot," she whispered, trembling. They locked me away. I cannot." "You will not stay here," Roan interrupted, stepping closer. His presence filled the room, and with every step, the shadows seemed to recoil. "No one can keep you from your fate. Not them, not the law, not even yourself." Lysandra looked at him, the first flicker of hope breaking through her fear. His voice was a promise, a force of nature that refused to be denied. Yet the weight of destiny pressed upon her chest, heavy and unyielding. She was not sure if she wanted freedom or if she feared what lay beyond these walls, the unknown, the binding ritual, the man she had never met yet somehow already knew. Roan's hand reached for the latch that had kept her imprisoned. The door shook violently, splintering as if the very magic in the room sought to free her. Lysandra's breath caught in her throat. The iron bars that had seemed so permanent moments ago now bent and twisted, as if obeying some unspoken command. "You belong to no one but yourself," he said, his voice softening, revealing a rare vulnerability. "But the kingdom needs you. And I need you." The words struck her like lightning, cutting through fear and doubt alike. Her heart ached with longing, confusion, and something deeper she could not name. She wanted to believe him, but trust had always been a dangerous luxury. Yet, as he stepped forward, reaching for her hand, she felt the bond stir stronger, a magnetic pull between them that neither could deny. The chamber seemed to respond to their connection. Shadows twisted and flickered, whispers of forgotten magic echoing through the stone walls. Lysandra's pulse raced, her senses alert. She realized that her imprisonment had been more than a physical cage. It had been a test, a trial to see if she could withstand fear, isolation, and betrayal. And now the trial was over, or so it seemed, but fate, as always, had more to reveal. As her fingers brushed against Rowan's, a chill ran through the room, more potent than any winter wind. The shadows deepened, coiling like serpents around the corners. Whispers rose from the darkness, a sound older than the palace itself, carrying both warning and promise. The bond between them was no longer just choice. It was destiny, and destiny could be dangerous. Lysandra's heart pounded as the Alpha King stepped fully into the chamber, his presence undeniable. She felt a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration, the pull of fate and the thrill of defiance mixing inside her. The night outside was quiet, but inside the tower the air was alive with magic, tension, and possibility. "You will not be locked away again," Roan said firmly, his hand steady around hers. "Not by anyone, not by anything." For the first time in her life, Lysandra believed it, and yet the shadows in the corners whispered warnings she could not ignore. Something ancient, powerful, and unseen stirred within the kingdom, something that would not be so easily denied. The Alpha King looked into her eyes, his expression intense, almost desperate. "Come with me, now, before it is too late." She hesitated, torn between fear and trust, past betrayals and the pull of destiny. But the magnetic force between them was irresistible. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, her hand slipping fully into his. The moment she did, the tower seemed to shiver, as if recognizing the bond that had been formed. Shadows danced and twisted around them, whispers growing louder, carrying promises of trials and challenges to come. Lysandra knew one thing with certainty: her life, as she had known it, was over. She was stepping into a world of power, magic, and destiny far larger than herself, and she would not be alone. The Alpha King led her toward the door, and as they emerged, the grand hall loomed before them. The ceremonial chants continued, unaware that the chosen mate had been found, not by law or tradition, but by fate itself. Lysandra's heart raced. She knew that her path with Roan would be fraught with danger, desire, and discovery. But for the first time, she felt alive, and yet, even as the ceremony reached its peak, a new shadow flickered across the hall. Someone, or something, watched them from the darkness, eyes gleaming with unknown intent. The kingdom was not done testing them, and the night, full of magic and destiny, had only just begun. The shadows of the grand hall stretched long across the marble floors as Roan led Lysandra through the heavy double doors. The chants from the ceremony still echoed faintly, vibrating through the walls like the heartbeat of the kingdom itself. Lysandra's hand remained tightly in Roan's, though her pulse raced with fear, curiosity, and something deeper she could not name. For all his power and authority, Roan moved with caution, aware that every step could trigger whispers of rebellion or jealousy. Courtiers paused, their eyes widening at the sight of him with her at his side. Some gasped, others whispered quickly, their words lost to the wind. She could sense the tension in the room, the silent question. Who was this woman bold enough to stand with the Alpha King? Lysandra, still trembling from her confinement, looked up at Roan. His face was strong, determined, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of vulnerability. For the first time, she realized that the man who ruled the kingdom with iron and authority was also human, capable of doubt, of longing, of worry. You didn't wait for me to be ready, Lysandra whispered, her voice barely carrying over the wind that stirred the tapestries along the hall. I couldn't, Roan replied softly, yet every word carried weight. The ceremony does not wait, and neither could I. You belong to no cage, Lysandra, not this one, and not any other. His words carried a strange comfort, but the memory of being locked away gnawed at her. She wanted freedom, yes, but she also wanted the choice to make her own destiny, and now the destiny others had forced upon her was pressing in closer than ever. Roan led her through a hidden corridor, one that wound beneath the palace and into the deeper chambers few dared enter. The air grew cooler, scented with stone, ancient incense, and the faint metallic trace of old magic. Shadows flickered along the walls, reacting to their presence as if aware that two fates were intertwining in ways both powerful and forbidden. Why me? Lysandra asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Why did you come for me? Roan paused, the torchlight illuminating his face, sharp and intense. Because, he said slowly, you are not like the others. There is a fire in you, Lysandra, a strength that cannot be caged. I felt it the moment your absence was noticed. The kingdom senses it too. And perhaps I was drawn by something older, something deeper than either of us can yet understand. Lysandra's heart thudded painfully. His words were not flattery. They carried truth, and the weight of it pressed against her chest. She wanted to speak, to ask more, but fear and awe left her mute. All she could do was walk beside him, letting the magnetic force between them guide the steps she could no longer take alone. They arrived at a small chamber hidden beneath the castle, a room preserved in shadow, untouched by light. Here, Roan paused, turning to face her fully. You are safe for now, he said, though the faintest crease of worry lined his brow. But there are forces at work that will not allow your freedom without challenge. You must trust me, Lysandra. Trust yourself. She looked into his eyes and saw the same urgency, the same fierce protection that had driven him to break her prison. She wanted to trust him, desperately, but the memories of betrayal made her hesitate. How could she surrender to a bond forged in destiny, yet tested by fear? I don't know if I can, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. You can, he said, taking a step closer, and you will. You have no idea how much you can shape your own fate, but first you must understand who you are and what you carry. At his words, Lysandra felt a pulse in her veins, a strange warmth that spread through her body. The blood in her veins seemed to awaken, thrumming with power she had never known she possessed. The chamber itself seemed to hum, shadows bending slightly toward her, responding to her presence. Lysandra's fear flared, but beneath it, a spark of wonder ignited. What is happening to me? She asked, her voice trembling. It is your heritage, Roan explained. You are not merely a woman of this kingdom. Your blood carries ancient magic, a legacy the crown has long sought to understand. That is why they feared you, locked you away, tried to keep you from your destiny. And now, that power is stirring. Lysandra's mind spun. She had always felt different, strange, like an outsider looking in. But magic, power older than the walls of the palace, it was almost too much to comprehend. Yet as she looked at Rowan, she felt the weight of possibility pressing upon her shoulders. She could step into it, or she could run. But running had never been truly an option. Not now. Not with him standing here, with the strength of a king and the urgency of destiny in his eyes. She realized, reluctantly, that she had been given a choice few had. To embrace her power, to stand by a man who was both protector and companion, to forge a bond that might save or destroy the kingdom. Roan studied her face as if reading her thoughts. I will not force you, he said, voice low and steady. But the world will not wait, and neither can the magic within you. You must decide, Lysandra. Will you step into your destiny, or remain a prisoner of fear? She swallowed hard, the words burning through her like fire and ice. She wanted freedom, yes, but she wanted guidance, protection, and perhaps understanding. She looked at him, and for the first time, she felt she could trust. Perhaps not entirely, but enough to take the first step. Just as she nodded, the chamber door shuddered violently. Lysandra and Roan froze, their connection momentarily broken by the sound of approaching danger. A shadow flickered in the corridor outside, moving with deliberate and silent precision. It was not human, or if it was no ordinary intruder. Roan's eyes narrowed. They know you are here, he said, his hand moving instinctively to the hilt of his sword. And they will not allow you to stay alive if they can help it. Fear clawed at Lysandra's chest, but she steadied herself, drawing a deep, shivering breath. For the first time, she did not feel entirely alone. With him beside her, she could face the darkness that approached, and yet the tension in the air told her that this was only the beginning. The shadow paused just outside the doorway, unmoving, as if sensing their resolve. Roan stepped forward, his presence commanding the space. But Lysandra could feel the pulse of magic in the room intensify, responding to her awakening power. The air shimmered with possibility and threat alike. You will not face this alone, Rowan said, his voice carrying both promise and determination. Whatever comes, we face it together. Lysandra met his gaze, and something unspoken passed between them. Trust, fear, longing, and the faintest flicker of love. She nodded, her hand slipping fully into his, grounding herself in the bond that had been formed in shadow and trial. The shadow outside moved again, faster now, a reminder that danger was never far from those who dared to claim their destiny. Lysandra felt a strange mixture of dread and exhilaration. For the first time, she realized that the life she had known, the life of fear, isolation, and confinement, was over. She had stepped into a world larger than herself, a world where magic, power, and love intertwined in ways she could not yet fully comprehend. And as Roan prepared to face the approaching threat, Lysandra knew one thing with certainty. She would no longer be caged. Not by walls, not by tradition, not by fear. Together, they would face whatever darkness awaited. And together, they would forge a bond stronger than any prison or curse. But outside the chamber, the shadow grew closer, silent and relentless. And Lysandra knew that the trials of the night, and of her destiny, had only just begun. The moon hung high above the palace, casting a pale glow over the stone towers. Beyond the walls, the forest stretched in endless dark waves, a place both beautiful and dangerous, where whispers of the old magic moved between the trees. Roan led Lysandra through a hidden passage that opened into the shadowed woods, their footsteps silent on the soft, moss-covered ground. Lysandra's heart raced, not just from the fear of what might follow them, but from the closeness of Roan. He walked with a quiet authority, his hand brushing lightly against hers, a reminder that she was not alone. Yet the pull she felt toward him was complicated, a mixture of awe, trust, fear, and something far more powerful she could not yet name. "The forest is alive," Roan said, his voice barely above a whisper blending with the wind. "It will test us. It knows you, Lysandra. It knows the power within you." She looked up at him, startled. "It knows me?" "Yes," he replied. "Your blood is not ordinary. The magic in you is old, older than the kingdom itself. It will awaken if we survive the night." Lysandra shivered, unsure if it was the chill of the forest or the weight of destiny pressing upon her. She had always felt different, an outsider even among strangers, but the truth of her power, and the reality of standing beside the Alpha King, was almost too much to comprehend. Yet she could not turn back. Not now. Not when the force pulling her forward felt stronger than fear. The forest around them seemed to shift as they walked. Shadows deepened between the trees, moving with intent, whispering secrets she could almost understand. The wind carried voices, soft and distant, warning and beckoning at once. She realized that the magic stirring inside her responded to the forest, pulling her forward even as the unknown threatened them. Suddenly, a rustling sound came from the underbrush. Lysandra froze, gripping Roan's hand tightly. He stopped, his eyes scanning the darkness. In the distance, a figure emerged, a warrior from a rival clan, their armor glinting faintly in the moonlight. But as the figure stepped closer, Lysandra realized it was not merely a person. Shadows clung unnaturally to their form, twisting and coiling like living tendrils. "They are here," Roan said quietly, his voice steady but tense. "And they are not alone." Lysandra felt her pulse quicken. She had always known her life would be difficult, but she had never imagined facing something so clearly tied to the magic she carried. She realized, with a mix of fear and wonder, that she had a role to play in whatever came next. This was not merely survival, it was awakening. Roan moved to position himself in front of her, his presence protective and commanding. "Whatever happens, you must trust yourself, and trust me," he said, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "The path ahead will test us, but we will face it together." The shadowed figure lunged, moving with unnatural speed. Roan intercepted, his movements precise, fluid and powerful. The clash of steel echoed through the forest, though the sound seemed muted by the dense trees. Lysandra's heart pounded in her chest, and instinctively she raised her hands. A faint light pulsed from her fingertips, responding to the danger and the tension, illuminating the immediate area. Her eyes widened in shock. I did that?" she whispered. Roan glanced at her, a flicker of awe crossing his face. "Yes," he said, "and that is only the beginning. You have more power than you know, Lysandra. More than anyone could have imagined." Fear and exhilaration collided inside her. For so long she had felt powerless, locked away, ignored. But now, she felt the first taste of control, of influence over her surroundings. The shadowed warriors recoiled slightly, unnerved by the light she emitted, giving Roan the advantage he needed to press forward. The battle was short but intense. With Lysandra's awakening power and Roan's unmatched skill, the shadowed intruders were forced to retreat, dissolving into the trees like smoke in the wind. The forest seemed to exhale, the tension lifting momentarily, leaving an almost sacred silence. Lysandra sank to her knees, trembling. "I never knew I could do that," she whispered. Roan knelt beside her, resting a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You will learn," he said softly. "And you will grow stronger. But first, you must understand the choices before you. This power, it can save lives, or it can destroy. You must choose carefully how to wield it." She looked up at him, the intensity in his gaze making her heart ache. I don't know if I can control it," she admitted. "You can," he said firmly, "and you must. You are not merely a pawn in this kingdom's game. You are its key. And more than that, you are mine to protect, as I am yours." Her breath caught. The words were not just a promise, they were a pledge, binding her to him not by law, not by ceremony, but by choice. For the first time, she felt the depth of connection that destiny had promised, and with it came a strange mixture of comfort and fear. They continued through the forest, moving cautiously but with purpose. The trees seemed to watch them, ancient witnesses to the unfolding events. Lysandra could feel the magic around her responding to her presence, her heartbeat syncing with the pulse of the forest. She began to understand that her power was not merely for defense. It was tied to the land, to the very soul of the kingdom. As dawn approached, the sky turning pale with the first light of morning, they arrived at the edge of a cliff that overlooked the kingdom. Below, the palace glimmered like a jewel, the grand hall still faintly visible even from this distance. The wind whipped through her hair, and for the first time, Lysandra felt free, not just from the tower, but from the fear that had ruled her life for so long. But the moment of peace was fleeting. A tremor ran through the ground, subtle at first, then growing stronger. Lysandra staggered, gripping Roan's arm for support. The cliffside seemed to shiver, as if the land itself was alive and restless. "What? What is happening?" she asked, fear rising again. Roan's eyes narrowed, scanning the horizon. "The magic in you. It is awakening fully, and it is attracting attention. Forces older than the kingdom itself are stirring. We are not yet safe." Lysandra's pulse quickened. She realized that the journey ahead would be far more dangerous than she had imagined. The power inside her was not merely a gift. It was a responsibility, one that could change the fate of the kingdom and everyone she cared for. Roan turned to her, his face solemn but tender. "You have a choice, Lysandra. You can step fully into your destiny, embrace the power within you, and face what is coming. Or you can turn back, and the kingdom may fall without your strength." Her breath caught. She had never imagined herself capable of holding such power, of facing such responsibility. Yet as she looked at him, standing resolute at her side, she felt the courage stirring within her. She could not run, not from destiny, not from him, not from herself. I will face it," she said finally, her voice steadying. "I will not hide. I will not be afraid." Roan's expression softened, a faint smile brushing his lips. "Good," he said, "because we do not face this alone. We face it together." For a brief moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The sun rose over the horizon, painting the kingdom in gold and silver, and for the first time, Lysandra felt hope. Yet even as light touched the land, shadows stirred beneath the roots of the forest, deep and ancient. Something waited, patient and relentless, watching the two who dared defy fate and awaken a power long forgotten. Lysandra understood then that her journey was only beginning. She was no longer merely a captive or an outsider. She was a force to be reckoned with, and the Alpha King had become her partner, her protector, and perhaps something more. As they prepared to descend from the cliff and return to the kingdom, the wind carried a faint whisper through the trees, soft, chilling, and unmistakably alive. Lysandra felt a shiver run down her spine. The forces that had once imprisoned her were far from finished, and the true test of her courage, her power, and her heart was yet to come. The kingdom below glimmered in the first light of dawn, but the beauty of the morning did little to soothe the tension in the air. The forest surrounding the palace whispered with secrets, shadows shifting as if alive. Lysandra and Roan made their way carefully, each step alert, every sense stretched to its limit. The forest was not just trees and wind, it was alive, and it knew of the awakening within Lysandra. She could feel the power in her veins humming, stronger than ever, calling out to the land itself. Every leaf seemed to pulse with it, every branch bending slightly toward her. Fear no longer dominated her heart. Instead, a fierce determination burned within. She would not be a pawn, a victim, or a captive. She would be the force she had always been destined to become. Roan's hand brushed hers, grounding her as they moved through the dense trees. His presence was a steady anchor, but she sensed the weight of responsibility in his gaze. He, too, carried a burden, one that was not only of ruling the kingdom, but of protecting her, and perhaps learning to trust love again after years of solitude and command. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice quiet but intense. Lysandra inhaled deeply, feeling the magic surge within her. "I am," she said. "Whatever comes, we face it together." The air shifted suddenly, a chill running down her spine. The shadow they had sensed in the forest appeared before them, a figure cloaked in darkness, its eyes glowing with unnatural light. It moved with a predatory grace, circling them, testing, calculating. Lysandra's pulse quickened, but she did not step back. Instead, she drew on the power that had awakened within her, letting it flow through her hands, through her very presence. The shadow hissed, recoiling slightly at her display of strength. Roan stepped in front of her, sword drawn, his posture unyielding. "We do not fear you," he said, his voice commanding, carrying the weight of a king and protector. "Leave, or face us both." The figure laughed softly, a sound that chilled the blood and echoed through the trees. "You cannot stop what has waited centuries to awaken," it whispered. "She will choose, and the world will fall or rise by that choice alone." Lysandra's eyes narrowed. "Then I choose," she said firmly, the power in her blood responding to her will. Light flared from her fingertips, spreading outward, illuminating the clearing. The shadow recoiled again, hissing as though burned by the truth of her resolve. Roan's eyes widened in awe. He had seen her power grow, but the clarity and strength in her decision made him realize the magnitude of her gift. "You are stronger than I imagined," he said softly, pride and admiration lacing his tone. Lysandra lifted her chin, feeling the flow of magic pulse in harmony with her heartbeat. "I am not afraid," she said, "and I will not let fear control me, or my destiny." The shadow surged forward suddenly, faster than either could react, and a battle unlike any other erupted. Roan's sword clashed with unseen forces, while Lysandra's magic wove through the air, striking with precision and force. The forest itself seemed to pulse with energy, responding to the conflict, the wind howling through the trees as though urging them onward. It was a battle of will, power, and destiny. Every strike, every movement tested them, tested their bond, their courage, and the awakening strength within Lysandra. Yet with each moment, the synergy between them grew. Her magic, wild and untamed, was guided by his skill, and his strength, disciplined and precise, was illuminated by her light. Finally, with a burst of power that shook the forest floor, Lysandra focused all her energy. Light flared outward, brighter than the dawn itself, enveloping the shadow. The figure screamed, the sound more like wind through the trees than any human voice, and then dissipated into nothingness, leaving silence in its wake. The forest seemed to exhale, the tension lifting. Lysandra sank to her knees, exhausted but exhilarated. Roan knelt beside her, supporting her as she caught her breath. "You did it," he said, awe and relief in his voice. "You faced it, and you won." She looked up at him, her chest heaving, her hair tangled from the wind. "We did it," she corrected, smiling faintly. "I could not have done it alone." He smiled, a rare warmth in his expression. "No one could. That is why we are together, not just in destiny, but in choice." They rose together, their hands intertwined. The kingdom lay before them, bathed in the light of the rising sun. It was beautiful, fragile, and waiting for the new era that Lysandra's awakening and Rowan's leadership would bring. She felt the full weight of her power and her responsibility, but also a freedom she had never known. She could no longer be caged, physically or by fear. "You will not be imprisoned again," Rowan said, his voice steady. "By anyone or anything. You are free." "I am free," Lysandra repeated, savoring the words. "And I choose to stay, not because I must, but because I want to, with you." Rowan's eyes softened, and for a moment, the world seemed to pause, honoring the unspoken bond between them. The power in her veins no longer felt like a curse, but a gift, a chance to shape the kingdom, protect its people, and stand beside the man who had broken down her prison and shown her a future she could embrace. But even in the calm, the whispers of the forest reminded her that magic and destiny were never entirely quiet. The trials of the past, the shadows of the kingdom, and the lingering echoes of ancient forces all reminded them that vigilance was necessary. Yet for the first time, Lysandra felt ready. She was no longer the frightened girl locked in a tower. She was a woman awakened, powerful, and determined. As they made their way back to the palace, the citizens who had gathered at the ceremony watched in awe. Whispers spread quickly. The Alpha King had claimed his mate, not by force alone, but by the undeniable bond that now united them. There was fear, yes, for change always brought uncertainty, but there was also hope. The kingdom sensed that a new era had begun, one of courage, strength, and partnership unlike any they had known before. Rowan and Lysandra climbed the steps to the grand hall together. Every eye was upon them, yet they walked with quiet confidence, hands still entwined, hearts bound by something far stronger than tradition or law. Lysandra felt the weight of her choice settle into her very bones. She had embraced her power, faced her fears, and claimed her destiny. At the doors to the hall, Rowan stopped, turning to her with an expression that was both solemn and tender. "Whatever comes next," he said, "we face it together. Always." "I promise," Lysandra said, her voice steady, her eyes shining. "Together." They stepped into the hall, the sunlight streaming through the windows, illuminating them like figures of legend. The court fell silent, witnessing the bond that had formed in shadow and trial. The Alpha King and his chosen mate had emerged from darkness, not only alive but stronger, united, and ready to face whatever the kingdom and destiny had in store. The people watched, sensing the shift, sensing the power and love that radiated from them. Lysandra's magic hummed quietly under her skin, a promise of protection and transformation. Roan's strength was no longer just authority. It was partnership, devotion, and courage. Together, they were more than king and chosen mate. They were a force that could bend fate itself. As they reached the throne, Lysandra finally understood that her imprisonment, her fears, and her doubts had all been a prelude. She had been tested, challenged, and tempered like steel. And now, standing beside Rowan, she felt the quiet triumph of one who had embraced destiny rather than fled from it. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the faintest whispers through the palace halls. The shadows were still there, but they no longer felt threatening. They were witnesses, observers of a bond forged in trials, magic, and trust. Lysandra had faced the darkness, embraced her power, and chosen love and courage above fear. The Alpha King knelt before her, not in dominance but in reverence. His eyes held admiration, gratitude, and a depth of emotion that words could not contain. Lysandra felt a warmth in her chest, a fulfillment she had never thought possible. She reached down, taking his hand, and in that touch, a promise was sealed. Not by law, not by ritual, but by choice, trust, and unwavering partnership. The kingdom's dawn had arrived, not just in light, but in hope, strength, and a future forged by two who had dared to defy fate. The journey was far from over, but the first step had been taken. Together, Roan and Lysandra would face whatever shadows remained, for they had broken the chains, both physical and of fear, and claimed a destiny that belonged to them alone.